another episode of Let's Talk Deer, brought to you by Grandpa Ray Outdoors, owned by Mr. John O'Brien. John's a Midwestern guy. He's around the Madison, Wisconsin area. He's been an agronomist for over 29 years. So he knows seed, he knows soil, and he knows what white-tailed deer need. John has a large seed company, Grandpa Ray Outdoors, but also he's in educating. He's one of the best educator, seminar, platform speaker, communicator for soil, water, and cover. The soil brings the food, the water hydrates, and the cover keeps them safe. So that's what whitetail needs. So any questions at all about seed, go to grandparrayoutdoors.com. Let's Talk Deer does receive compensation from Grandpa Ray Outdoors for mentioning him on my show. Bruce Hutchin, host of Let's Talk Deer, and I'm pleased to have John O'Brien. John O'Brien is the sponsor of Let's Talk Deer, and he's the CEO and president of Grandpa Ray Outdoors. John, welcome to the show. So I did the introduction, and this is John O'Brien. We had a little technical difficulties there. Sorry about that, folks. But we're going to talk about the difference of North and South when it comes to food plots. John, take it away.
Yeah, we're about the end of July, and a lot of the food plotters in the northern climates are about ready to go or just starting. We got until about June 1st in the far northern reaches, June 1st. I probably misspoke. We got until about September 1st. Yeah, we got until about September 1st in the northern reaches, September 15th in kind of the transition zone. And then again, the guys in the deep south, they usually don't start until we get into September, middle of September through middle of October. So guys in the north, this is the time for spraying off. If you get weeds, spray off a glyphosate, or more and more of my customers are trying to get away from Roundup using things like 2,4-D, 2,4-DB for broadleaves, clethodim for grasses. Spray off your food plots, wait a week, and then it's go time for planting. So a lot of people get nervous. We have some time. We got over a month's worth of time to get these food plots in. The one thing that comes up that I just want to remind people is, when's an ideal time to plant? Most food plot forages, fall plantings mature in 60 days. When's the first for killing frost in your area? I ask people. In my area here in south central Wisconsin, it's October 1st. Come back 60 days from then. Your magic date every year would be around August 10th or so, to be planting food plots. So, August 1st, August 15th is a great time as you go a little bit farther south. Like I said, as you could be still effective in the middle of September to get these food plots in. And again, Grandpa Ray's, we sell a diverse amount of mixes for the northern guys, but a lot of the same mixes that work good in the north also work good in the south. We just got some different planting dates involved according to where you live.
So when you think about it, you're in Wisconsin, so how much different is it for the people up above, I think it's Highway 24 that goes from Green Bay to Eau Claire, right? So if you're north of that line, then do you advance it and get it in a little bit earlier, or is it the same as southern Wisconsin? Help me out with that.
Yeah, we usually look at 10 to 14 days earlier. So that's where, even though on my bags and my recommendations generally are don't plant before August 1st, the guys farther up there, especially with if you got enough timely rain and we're not looking at 90 to 100 degree temps, we got guys starting now, like, July 24th, in that kind of range. So we can go a little bit earlier. But yet again, even if you don't plant till, August 10th in those northern reaches, we still got 45, 50 days before, probably a typical first killing frost. And a lot of these forages that we're planting in the fall stay green, below 26 degrees, 10 degrees like the Winford brassicas and kale, below zero on some of these annual clovers. So, we got plenty of growth even in these northern areas, even if we don't get things in the ground for the next couple of weeks.
So what should I be thinking? I'm in the north. Basically, I'm going to say north of Interstate 80, basically across the country. What am I looking at planting for the best yields and to be able to support my deer herd through the winter months.
Yeah, Grandpa Ray Outdoors, we're different. We have a philosophy that I'm trying to get as much yield as we can. What causes the much yield as you can? Same factors that make most of these forages more palatable and attractive for deer. Genetics matter. Yields matter. What we're looking at doing is my philosophy is we want to always plant something that tolerates hot, something that tolerates dry, something that tolerates wet, something that tolerates cold. No matter if you're looking at our Frosty Delight, Fall Draw, Grains and Greens, Inner Sanctum, Mass Builder, no matter what mixes that you might find that were offered by Grandpa Ray Outdoors, they do really well pretty much in any area that you live in the United States. The genetics, diverse. Species, we got higher yielding. I'm not using the traditional average yielding rapes. We use others newer improved genetics. We're not just using Ladino clovers with a little chicory like in some of your perennial blends. We're also using multi-graze genetics. If the deer eat Winfred brassica, it'll throw more leaves. They eat it, it throws more leaves. We got multi-graze forage turnips that we use. That New Zealand, they'll graze cattle over them up to 6 rotations per year. So if you got a lot of deer numbers, we can handle some of this grazing pressure from the deer. So as far as what should you plant? We got many, many, many options. And the other part of the philosophy is don't just plant one mix. Don't just plant 2 mixes. We might have clients that are planting 6 to 8 different mixes throughout the year using strategy for your own soil, trying to put deer where we want them to be at the point in time we want them to be there. And also having philosophies whereas whatever we're planting now is going to benefit whatever we decide to plant next year. So biodiversity is a term I'd use, a diversity of species. Most mixes include 6, 8 different forages. And so no matter what Mother Nature throws at us, we got you covered. Less risk. I'm your food plot insurance agent.
I like that. So some specific hints right now for the guys, north of Interstate 80, let's say.
Yeah. Like I said, you want to spray off your weeds. If weeds are an issue, if weeds aren't a big issue, why spray? I mean, it's called integrated weed management. Spray when we have to. Now, here's the other thing that I do bring up a lot. People tend to love to overwork the ground. They like to work it deep. The first time you ever work a food plot, I usually say to people, that's the deepest you ever want to work it. I believe in minimum tillage. So I have a number of different customers I tend to say, only work the ground 1 to 2 inches deep. Why is that? Well, a lot of weed seeds are in that 3rd to 4th inch in the soil profile. So, and the other part of that strategy is when guys work the ground really deep, especially going across with a tiller or a deep disc. You know what tends to happen? That ground gets really fluffed up. Guys broadcast the seed. They run over across that with a roller or a Colopacker like all the experts tell people to do. Where does that seed end up when you're going across that really light and fluffy ground? Way too deep. Okay. Some people say, whoa, John, that's why I Colopack. Work the ground nice and deep and fluff it up, and then a Colopack then broadcast the seed over top. Then we don't get the seed too deep. Could be true, but you know what happens then? You're compacting the soil too much. Way too many people are compacting the soil. You don't have enough oxygen in the soil then. So my whole part of the strategy is to get people to work the ground shallower for agronomics, shallower to bring up less weed seeds, right? Takes less fuel, takes less power, don't need as big equipment, to spend more money on seed and fertilizer versus to spend a lot of money on that big equipment. So even the beginner, the first timer, the guy that doesn't have a lot of acreage can be like me, could have a plot master and a 4-wheeler, or maybe a 4-wheeler, broadcast seeder, a drag harrow, a lawn roller. Don't need to have a lot of equipment if you're not having to work the ground that deep. Something that more people need to consider.
Yeah, because the food plots have turned suburban hunters and property owners to turn them into farmers, and we really don't know what we're doing. For generalization.
Yeah, or they listen to the people that are experts in the wildlife industry that really don't have agronomic background. And again, even though Whitetail Rendezvous and Let's Talk Deer is sponsored by Grandpa Outdoors, you and I know there's a lot of people in the industry that are promoting the seeds they are, and they're getting paid a lot of money to promote that seed.
A lot of seed. A lot of money.
And my deal is, I don't know what I don't know, but this has been my life since the early 90s. I know soil. I know forages. Nobody's paying me to promote or to do research, you name it. This is my life. And when I recommend something to somebody, everybody in the wildlife industry knows how to make things work right? But what happens when Mother Nature comes into play, stuff happens, and you got failure? That's a whole different ball game, is how to get people back on the track, or to maybe know some of the potential pitfalls, challenges. And that's the little thing with Grandpa Outdoors I kind of brought up. I'm like your food plot insurance agent. But even when it comes to educating how to plant, what to plant, where to plant, that's why I do so much education. I used to be a fireman years ago. I don't want to be a fireman. You know what, firemen? Firemen want people to have fire extinguishers. Firemen want to make sure their wiring is good. Everything's up to code. Firemen don't want to put out fires, right? They will if they have to, but that's my whole strategy. I'm trying to educate the wildlife industry so that you don't have to put out a fire and I don't have to put out a fire.
Well said, John. Well said. So what about our brethren down south of the Mason-Dixon line? I kind of look at Interstate 80, south of Interstate 80, and we start getting into different temperatures, different soils, longer hunts. In some states, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, I mean, you can go out and shoot a buck a day. You can shoot a deer a day, and the season's hell of a long time. And they got so many deer because the cover, I mean, it's a zoo. It's not a zoo, but
yeah. So like we have a number of different mixes. Almost anything, pretty much any seed mix I sell is also planted in the Deep South. Some people I've heard say, John, you're from Wisconsin. Why would your stuff work? Because a lot of the seed comes from New Zealand. Where's New Zealand? Southern Hemisphere. What kind of weather do they have in New Zealand? Very similar in the southern United States. So we're using Winfred, Nebraska, multi-grace forage turnips. We're using a lot of genetics that actually, believe it or not, does better in the south than in the north at times. So we're using mixes like our grains and greens and our fall draws and my new gold product. I got a southern version of it where we're using a southern adapted, southern developed by University of Georgia alfalfa, using an everlasting clover in some different mixes that does really well down south. So what our strategy with the guys down south is plant stuff that yields, plant stuff that tolerates hot and dry, plant stuff that's multi-graze. The deer eat it, it regrows, because there's a lot of these guys in the south, as you mentioned, that that they really draw on the deer when they do their food plots. And so you need to have as much feed, as much tonnage, but also we need to make that feed last from middle September through, in some cases, middle of February, early March, before they restart their early spring plantings. We need the groceries there.
Now, we talked earlier about the soil composition and compaction of the soil and sandy soils, and we know in the South they got a lot of sandy soils. There are some sections of Georgia that they call it the Black Forest. Or I can't think of the correct name, but it's perfecto soil, as good as they have in Iowa or other places up north. But when you think of that, how can you help people? How can Grandpa Ray Outdoors help people decide, okay, here's my plan, okay, not just for this year, but the 3-year cycle? What's your advice to those people?
Yeah, the big thing is like even basic concepts that I used a lot of annual clovers, or we're using a lot of diversity. People are really worried about liming, right? And their soil pH is dropping. Well, guess what? If we don't use as much dry fertilizer, if we can plant more annual forages that fixate their own nitrogen, we're giving back to the soil. We don't have to use as much urea, as much nitrogen in subsequent plantings. I also got a lot of different guys that are using my foliar plant foods, my liquid seed starter, my foliar. So it's the nutrients absorbed rapidly through the roots and the liquid starter, absorbed rapidly through the leaves with my liquid foliar, so we're able to get by without using as much dry. We also are going to be we're testing a product that's going really well that we'll be releasing to the general public for the guys that don't want to use dry fertilizer. They just want to use liquid. Guess what? Big advantages. Healthier soil. We have less drop in soil pH. So when people reach out to me, I'm like, well, do you want to consider, what are you doing? What have you done in the past? What's your goals? Ask about 10 different questions. Hey, as part of this thing you want to do, would you want to use less dry fertilizer? Would you consider moving to a liquid program? No matter what your strategy you use, whether it be dry or liquid, we want to be using forage blends that are going to have a purpose. Reducing fertilizers in the future, things people don't understand, they don't think about. Radishes, turnips, rutabagas, those bulbs, they suck up nutrients after they've started growing, right? The deer eat the tops off, but if they don't consume all the bottoms, that's full of nutrients. Those nutrients, when they re-rot back next spring, they become accessible again to the roots and the forages. So really what you just did is by planting some of these fall brassicas with the bulb heavy mixes, you just basically in essence are creating a time release fertilizer, right? And so, that's one thing. And also some of the forages that Grandpa Ray's uses, they basically reduce weed growth in future crops. So you don't have to use as much herbicides, which is healthier from the soil. And I got customers that are moving towards trying to either be organic or at least as natural as they can be with their food plotting. And again, that's how I thrive. That's why when I help create plans and a vision, working one-on-one with people, putting things on paper, using all the technology like Onyx Maps, HuntStand, soil samples, pictures they provide, and in some cases when I get on these properties around the United States, it helps me basically. What I'm really doing is like with farmers, they hire crop consultants. Almost every progressive farmer that plants corn and beans has a crop consultant, right? I'm a food plot consultant in essence. I'm helping people create plans, just like crop consultants do for farmers, but my focus and target is the average food plotter.
Folks, if you have questions, John can be reached at?
My website is www.grandparooutdoors.com. Email is obrionag@gmail.com. Phone number is 608-235-0628. You can find me at O'Brien Ag at Twitter. I blog on there on occasion. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube. I'll be putting more YouTube videos. I mean, there's probably 60 some out there now, but we'll be adding more as we go this fall. Grandpa Outdoors, there's a Grandpa Outdoors YouTube channel as well. A lot of places you can find me and my education.
Now, for people who want to get the insider scoop, you have something called Team Grow. Tell people about that.
Yeah, it's $25 a year. They can pay for that on my website. You get 10% off all your orders. You get access to private member mixes. You won't find them on the website. You got to be a member. Basically, you're part of my research team. 1, 2, maybe 3 years in advance, you get access to some new forages we're testing, new blends we're testing. Get a monthly newsletter. You get other member-only specials. End of the year, when we have return seed from dealers, you guys as Team Giro members get access to it. Get access to the private Facebook page, Team Giro Education Series, where I don't have to edit. I can just tell you and show my research. show things that I don't want to hand to the wildlife industry. Bruce, you and I know very few wildlife companies do any of their own research. You know that there's a lot of companies that are changing their strategies. And then, you know what? I hand a lot of stuff to people, but I don't hand everything to people. So that's where I put it, my private page. So, guys like you, the hardcore guys, or guys that are new, no matter what your experience, you get to hear the unedited John, which is different than what you see for the public consumption.
There you go. John, final thoughts, and I know you got a lot of orders to fulfill, so you got to get out of here, but final thoughts for the listeners of Let's Talk Deer with John O'Brien from Grandpa Ray Outdoors.
Yeah, my whole thing is with food plotting, do better before doing more. Don't just think about the now, consider the future. When you're listening to experts, don't be afraid to ask questions and challenge them. Before you buy seed, don't be afraid to ask for a tag or what's in there. I might be the only wildlife company in the wildlife industry that if you go on my website, you can see what's actually in the blend. Either that means I'm crazy or I believe in total transparency. So again, know what you're buying, have a strategy, and why not buy a bag with added value? Instead of just buying something that's got a pretty bag with a deer on it, why don't you buy from somebody such as myself where you can call or email anytime and get a consultant that his whole life is involved with soil, forages, and deer. That's my GRO challenge. Why not, Grandpa Ray's?
And with that, folks, thanks again, John O'Brien from Let's Talk Deer. This is your host, Bruce Hutchins, saying go out and make it a fantastic day.